we're going to have to be able to understand some key definitions or some key terminologies before we're able to get into the meat of the matter. So the first one, we look at this family right here. And of course, at face value, the children look like the parents. So what is genetics? What is this genetics that we're talking about? It is the study of the inheritance or the way in which parents are able to pass their characteristics or heritable traits to their offspring. Some literature will also define it as a transmittance of genes. And when we speak about genes, we're not talking about the denim type, but we're going to be looking at this definition later on. The genes located on the chromosome from one parent or from one generation to another. It is very important to know, and just a little fun tidbit there. But for our chromosome, by definition, this is a structure which contains the DNA within our cells. Did you know that the DNA codes for around 20,000 genes? And if we were to unwind the DNA, students, this would actually range to about 6 feet. So of course, for packaging, we have to package it in these nice structures that we call our chromosomes. So that genes that we referred to, the genes, you've been out and persons say, how you look like your father, so how you look like your mother. Yes, this genes that we're referring to is that, or what causes this. And by definition, it is the unit of inheritance. It is also the DNA sequence or the section of the DNA that codes for specific proteins or specific traits. And there are a diverse amount of genes that we find within the human genome. Some of these examples of genes would be eye color. We can have a gene for hair color, and we can have a gene for height. So in my case, I've inherited my parents' short genes. Our next terminology is alleles. And what is the definition of alleles? Alleles is a different possibility of a given trait or a different possibility of a given gene. Now, every trait have at least 2 alleles, and they're going to be examples that we're going to look on a little later on where there can be multiple alleles coding for the same trait. You usually get one from your mother, and you usually get one from your father. Now, in the early examples, we identify the gene for eye color. Now, some of the possible combinations that we could have could result in brown eye color, we could have blue eye color, we could have green, we could have azure eyes. All of these different possibilities are what we refer to as alleles. Or we're going to look at this diagram right here. So we have 2 chromosomes, and earlier you heard me say we got one from our dad. All right, so say for example in our diagrammatic representation, this would be our chromosome, and usually a chromosome exists in pairs. We get one from our father, and there we get one from our mother. And of course, we highlighted the gene in red. And in highlighting the gene, of course, for each of those genes, there are 2 or more alleles for it. So one would be for brown eye color, one would be for blue. Now, how is it in our possibility, or in this case, you recognize that we had one student having a gene for brown, and the student also have an allele for blue eye color. Which one will the student will show? This is determined by the next 2 terminologies that we have, which is dominant traits and recessive. So it's all determined by which of the alleles is dominant relative to the next. So by definition, allele is the one, the dominant trait, is the one that is going to be present, and if it's present, it will mask the appearance of the other. Now, in our simplified version of representing it, we usually use a capital letter. So in our example, say for example, here we have capital E, and we're going to use capital E to represent brown eyes. And for the recessive trait or the recessive allele will only show up in the absence of the dominant trait. So of course, we have to have two recessive traits in order for us to show that recessive characteristic. Using our simplified version for letters, we represent it using a common letter. So we are going to use common E. So let's do a demonstration here. We have our two alleles. So remember I said, of course, we have our dominant trait. E being capital represents brown eyes. And of course, if you have another chromosome that has common E, which is recessive, it could be blue eyes. So when we have the two possible combinations, what would be the trait that will be expressed within this child? So let's look at the first one. We have two capital E's. What do you think is going to be the trait of this child here? All right, so you recognize we have two dominant genes. So in this case, the child is going to have, yes, brown eyes. Look at our next example. We have two common E's. So remember, we're saying that the E is recessive in the common, and the capital, the common. And of course, this is for blue eyes. What is recessive? It shows in the absence of the dominant trait. So of course, in this case, what you recognize the child is going to have blue eyes. Let's look at our next example. The child has a capital E and a common E. In this case, what we end up finding is that because, of course, you have a trait or an allele for blue and for brown eyes, which one is the dominant? You recognize we have brown eyes being dominant and it's present. You have the trait for it. So the child in this case will end up having what? Yes, we're going to have brown eyes in this scenario. All right, so this is how the combinations of the different alleles would result in your traits being seen. Now we're going to move on to our next two definitions. So the terminology 6 is genotype and terminology 7 is phenotype. What is genotype? What is phenotype? Phenotype is the genetic makeup of the offspring. It is the alleles as they would express in their different combination within the organism. For phenotype, this is the physical characteristics. So your genotype, again, for G, genes, phenotype, P, physical characteristics. Let's look at an example. We have this color eyes, this color there. What would be the phenotype? We're saying phenotype is what is physical expressed. So when you look at an individual, what you see is their phenotype. So in this case, I'm looking at Roy. Roy has brown eyes. That is his phenotype. We're looking at Mary. Mary has blue eyes. So that would be her phenotype. But remember, we're saying that with the genotype, you can have multiple different combinations. So once the case where Roy has a dominant E or the capital E, in this case, Roy could have two capital E's or Roy could have a capital E and a common E. Both of these alleles together would have or genes together would have resulted in Roy having the phenotype brown eyes. But in the case of Mary, where she has blue eyes, she has to ensure that, of course, or in her case, her chromosomes would have to have two common E's or two recessive genes. Or terminology 8 and terminology 9, homozygous and heterozygous. And if we were to look at the prefix, homo meaning same and hetero meaning different, for homozygous, this refers to an organism where there are two of the identical alleles present. So, for examples, we can have the offspring having two capital E's. You recognize it's the same E's that we're seeing there, two capitals. So it is referred to as homozygous. And we say in a capital letter, it is dominant. So it's homozygous, dominant. What is another possibility of homozygous? We can have two common letters, and we're saying that in common letters, reiterating it is recessive. So in this case, it is referred to as homozygous recessive. Now for the heterozygous, this is where you have two different alleles for the same trait. And of course, our example, like what we saw before, we have a capital E and a common E, different alleles being present. Now let's recap what it is that we have covered so far. So again, we say that our chromosomes exist in pairs. You get one from your mother, one from your father. And these chromosomes are referred to as homologous chromosomes. Now, on each chromosome, you recognize that there are several different letters. These letters are referred to as our genes. Each individual letter is referred to as a respective allele for that gene. If it's a case where we have two capital letters as represented with AA, this gene is referred to as homozygous dominant. If it's a case where we have two common letters, this represents homozygous recessive. And if we have a common and a capital letter, so in the example with the C, it is referred to as heterozygous. Now, just to point out, you are seeing locus. That's a new terminology that we did not define. But a locus is just the location of the gene on the respective chromosome. Now, we're going to be looking at how it is that we proceed to inherit traits in humans. And for this, we are going to be utilizing a simple diagram that we refer to as a Punnett square. Now, the Punnett square is a diagrammatic representation that allows for us to show all the possible combinations when a mother and a father procreate. Now, for this, we can also have the probabilities being calculated. So we're going to also be doing a little bit of math in this example. So it generally looks like, sorry about that, it generally looks like this. So it's a square that is divided into 4 quarters. On one side, we're going to put the father's possibilities or the father's alleles. On one side, we're going to put the mother's alleles. And remember, for each child, you get one from your mother, one from your father. We're going to show how it is that these combinations can arise. So let's look at our first example. We're demonstrating where a father has the gene AA. And for the mother, she has the same gene, but of course, in her case, she has the homozygous recessive. So it is 2 common letters. So we have split up our alleles. So for the father, you recognize here. So let's do the possible combination for the father. We have 2 capital letters. And of course, when we separate the alleles, we get a capital A and another capital A. For the mother, we're saying that for her gene in the homozygous recessive, we have a common A and another common A. Now let's show how the combination will arise. Just like if we were to do grid reference, we're going to match the father's first possibility with the mother's first possibility. So we see them matching with yellow. We could also match the second one with the mother's first. And we go again. We can match the father's first with the second. We can match the father's second with the mother's second. So what you'll recognize in this diagram is that there are 4 possibilities that we can have from the combination of the alleles. So when you come to have a specific characteristic, students, really and truly it is the luck of the draw as to which characteristic you might get from your parents. So let's look at the father here. So we have the father's dominant trait combining with the mother's recessive trait. We could have father's dominant trait combining with the mother's recessive trait right here. So that's a second possibility. Though they're the same thing, another possibility. All right, let's look again. Father's first, mother's second. Another one, the father's second going with the mother's second. All right. Now, in this case, remember, what are we, for the offsprings that we get, or the children that they could get, the genotype. What is the genotype? Remember, we use the terminology heterozygous. So all the possibilities that we can get would be heterozygous. So we have 4 capital A, common A, or for heterozygous. And of course, if we were to do the math, 4 over 4 as a percentage, 100%. Let's look at example 2. And these are some of the possible questions that we can have being shown up on our exams. Now we have A being the dominant gene which codes for normal color and colored pigment. So say, for example, we have dark melanin in the skin. So if you have the dominant gene A, you get melanin or a darker complexion. If you have common A, which is recessive, and in the recessive, if you have homozygous recessive, it results in a condition that we call albinism. Now we're going to say, what is the probability if a man who is a carrier for albinism and a woman who suffers from albinism could have a child that suffers from albinism? So let's look at our Punnett square. Now, just to erase right here, and we're going to show our diagrams. So let's isolate our genes. We said that the father is a carrier for normal genes. So he's a carrier for normal, and he's also a carrier for albinism. So if he's a carrier, it means that, of course, he would have normal skin complexion, but also he would be the carrier, which means that he has a recessive. For the mother, she suffers from albinism, which means that she is in the recessive. So, of course, 2 common A's. So our possibility for the alleles, we have a capital A and a common A for the father being the carrier. And for the mother, we have 2 common A's. Now, if we were to go back to our Punnett square, this is the combination. The father's dominant gene combining with the mother's recessive gene. We could have the father's recessive gene combining with the mother's another recessive trait. We have the father's dominant allele combining with the mother's recessive. And then our final combination, fourth, we have 2 additional recessive. So these are all the possible combinations that we can have for their children. Now, if we were to do the math or the probability, show the probability, we have 2 capital A, common A. So we have 2 heterozygous. We have 2 common A, common A's. All right, and if we were to do the probability, so we have 2 over 4, of course, and this as a percentage, 50%. All right. In this case, we have 2 common A's. All right. So, of course, 2 over 4. And this also would represent 50%. So, in this case, the probability is that we get 50% heterozygous and we get 50% homozygous recessive. Now, the genotype ratio would be at 2 to 2 because, of course, we're seeing 2 possible combinations, 2 of one, 2 of the next. And for the phenotype, which is what we see, so this is when we go to the core of that child's genetic makeup that we're seeing is the genotype. But the phenotype is what would they look like? We would have the possibility of 50% being normal skin complexion, and would have 50% also being albinism. Let's look at example number 3. We have a dominant trait being capital A, and of course, in this case, it results in purple, and in the recessive, which is common A, it results in white. And we're saying, what is the offspring, or what is the possibility that, of course, we would get anything that results from 2 heterozygous parents? If there is 2 heterozygous, it means that one parent had capital dominant and a recessive common, and the next parent has the same. Now, the possibilities that we have in this multiple choice question, we have that it could result in all purple florid plants. We have that it could also result in purple plants and white plants. Another chance, which is C, it could result in 2 types of white plants. And then, of course, we have that it could result in all white or all purple. And we're going to be showing how it is that we will answer this multiple choice. So again, we're saying that we're crossing 2 parents or 2 plants. Both of them would be in the heterozygous. So both have a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So from the parent, we have dominant, capital A. From the next one, we have also a capital A. And I would ask you what these are termed after. So from the next, we have recessive A. But from the second parent, what are we noticing? We get capital A, or the dominant allele. From parent 1, or the father, we're getting capital A. From parent 2, we're getting common A. From the father, we're getting, again, common A. And what's the next combination? Yes, we're getting another common A from the mother. Now, you recognize that in this case, we have 3 different possibilities than what we had in the first example. So, if this was the genotype of a parent, what would it have resulted in? It would have resulted in 1 homozygous dominant. So you recognize, yes, we have 2 capital letters. So we could have an offspring that has 2 capital A's. We could also have an offspring that has a capital A and a common A. So that would be 2 heterozygous. Or we could also have an offspring that has homozygous recessive, which is 2 common A's in this case. All right, so let's write our ratios. So just like what we did before, but this time what we have is a capital A. So again, these are what we're working with. So we're working with heterozygous. And what were the possibilities? We got homozygous dominant. How many of them did we get? We got 1 possibility. So it's 1/4. So in this case, this would be 25%. We could have also had 2 heterozygous. So 2, a capital A and a common A. 2, so it's 2/4. And in this case, 50%. Or we could also have a case where we get 1. There we go. Homozygous recessive. And in this case, it would be 1/4, which would give us another 25%. So our genotype or genotypic ratio would be 25% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homozygous recessive. Genotypic ratio, 1 to 2 to 1. And our possible phenotypes, if it's a case where we have, remember we said for the dominant gene, it always is expressed. So anywhere we're seeing there's a capital A, it means that the plant could be purple. So we have 3 possibilities of getting purple plants. If we have only recessive, which means we have 2 common letters, it means that, of course, we get white. So in this case, we have 1 possibility. So our phenotypic ratio, 3 to 1. Let's answer the question now. Remember, it was a multiple choice. So we're saying A was dominant for purple. That's capital A. And common A was recessive. And if we have 2 plants coming together, being in the heterozygous, what would they result in? So we recognize that we would end up getting what? Yes, we would get purple plants and white plants. So if your answer was B, congratulations, you got that one correct. Let's look at example number 4. And in this case, we're looking at one that is pretty usual to us or to our society. We're looking at the sickle cell disease. Now, in sickle cell, It is one that results from the recessive gene. So in order for someone to suffer from sickle cell, you must be in the recessive or the homozygous recessive. If it's a case where you have the dominant gene as symbolized by the capital S mixed with a recessive, those are the persons we term as carriers. And then if you have two genes, which is the two capital dominant genes, two capital S, we refer to these persons as normal. Now for the question, what is a probability that a man and a woman who are both carriers? So for the man and the woman, we're saying that they are both carriers, so they have a normal gene and they're also carrying the sickle cell gene. What is the probability that they would have a child who suffers from sickle cell? Let's look at our combination for alleles. So just like what we had before, the man and the woman are carriers, so both have the recessive gene in this case. And what we're going to do is do the Punnett square so that, of course, we can show whether or not the child would be sickle. Now, if you have any questions on what we have done so far, you can send them in to our various platforms. When we are back, we will answer your questions and we will wrap up and we will be right back.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
Hi! We haven't left you out. It's Get Moving Kids. Home workout series with Jamaica Moves. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m. on TVJ.
Get COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching. Hi there, I'm Simon Preston.
Hi! We haven't left you out. It's Get Moving Kids. Home workout series with Jamaica Moves. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m. on TVJ.
Get moving! Home workout series with Jamaica Moves.
Jamaica move, mobilize, flexercise. Jamaica move, Jamaica move, Jamaica move, mobilize, flexercise. Come on, take a selfie, breathe.
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8:35 a.m.
Hi! We haven't left you out. It's Get Moving Kids. Home workout series with Jamaica Moves. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
CSEC biology, and we're focusing on genetics. Let us continue. Now, in our previous example that we got before the break, you were asked to find out what is the probability that a man and a woman, both carriers for the sickle cell gene, could have a child that has or suffers from sickle cell. Now for this one, we're going to be taking to the whiteboard and I'm going to demonstrate it for you, how it is that we would have it. And we did somewhat a similar example so for those students who picked it up, good job so far. So we have the father, and we said the father is a carrier, so he has the dominant, and we're using capital S. And then of course he also is a carrier, which means he has a common S. For the mother, what we're saying is that she's also a carrier, so capital S and a common S. Remember, we say that we do it just like grid reference. So we match father's first possible allele to the mother's. Father's second possible allele to the mother's. And in this case, please note that we always write the dominant gene first. Then we also have this combination, and then we have the final combination. Looks familiar? Yes, it's just like the one that we did a few minutes ago with the plant. So, if your Punnett square looked like this, definitely you're on the right track. Now, it's for us to isolate that child who is suffering from sickle cell. Would it be the first quarter, 2 capital S? No, because we say, of course, if you have the dominant gene, that means that you're normal. So it's possible for a man and a woman in this case to have a normal child because, of course, they could pass on 2 dominant alleles. What about a capital S and a common S? In this case, no, it would be a carrier child because, of course, the dominant gene is there. So, of course, in this case, the child is going to be a carrier, still having normal characteristics. What would it be for the child to have sickle cell? Yes, the child must have 2 recessive alleles, so 2 common letters. And what would be the probability? We have 25%, so it's 1 over 4, just like what we were calculating, or 25%. Good job, students. There's our answer, and for that you get a smiley face today. Now let's look at some additional terms that we can have. Now, you'll see in your exam questions some additional terms being used. You'll see P, you'll see F1, you'll see F2. Now, P refers to the original parents that we have. So we'll take, for example, Mary and John. Together, they would be the parents. Their children are referred to as the F1 generation. Their children's children would be referred to as the F2 generation. So when you get a question and you see these, you can always map it out. P refers to our parents. So P times P gives us our F1. And then, of course, when we have 2 F1 generations coming together, that's what results in F2. Now, this theory was proposed by someone named Mendel, and I propose that, of course, you go and do some research on the history of genetics, and you will see some of the concepts coming out as to how we arrived at these terminologies. Now, our additional terminologies for today. We have incomplete dominance. Now, for incomplete dominance, this is a case or the situation in which one allele is not completely dominant over the next. And of course, make sure you don't make this mistake, but for this one, it results in what we call a blend. So, if we have a red and a white flower and we say that they are incompletely dominant, remember what we said with dominance. With dominance, one would show and the next would only show in the recessive. With incomplete dominance, it's a case where it results in a blend when both alleles, the dominant, what we would have termed as a dominant and what we now term as a recessive, are present, would result in. So take, for example, red and white. Remember what we would say if it's a case where we had a dominant gene before. We had a capital R and a common R. In our previous examples, that would have resulted in a red because the dominant gene was there. With incomplete dominance, it results in a pink plant because, of course, one is neither dominant over the next. Or additional terminology is for codominance, and this is another scenario in which it's similar to incomplete but not the same. For codominance, it does not result in a blend, however, it results in both alleles being expressed. So by definition, this is a situation in which both alleles contribute to the phenotype, what we see for the organism. And we result in both of them being expressed. And we see this every day when we go to country. A white cow is crossed with a solid brown cow. And what we have resulting is a white and brown. So you recognize we're not getting a shade of brown or a shade of white. In this case, we have both being present, and so we say it's codominance, where both of them are being shown. Now, predominantly, the ideal example that's required by our syllabus is for blood group. Now, for blood group, we have 4 possibilities. You have A, B, AB, and O. In the case, we represent them using, and sometimes we use the letters IA or IB or IO to represent the alleles, and I represents for immunoglobulins. IO is recessive, so that is recessive, but IA and IB are codominant. So if someone inherits an A allele, and they also inherit the B allele, they would end up having a blood type that is AB. All right? But if it's a case where the person has IA and they have IO, remember we're saying that O is recessive, they automatically get the A blood type. If it's a case where they have IB and IO, they would have the B blood type. So we're going to use a table to summarize that. From parent 1, we get A allele. From parent 2, we get another A allele. Notice it's the same allele, so of course, what's the child's genotype? AA, both dominant genes here. And of course, the phenotype would be blood type A. Another possibility, capital A and O. We're saying O is recessive. What would it result in? AO, blood type A. Next possibility, BB, blood type B, because we have the same allele in this case. So of course, blood type B. B again is dominant to the recessive gene or recessive allele, sorry, O. So of course we have BO, and what it would result in? Blood type B. But what if we were to have 2 O's, 2 recessive alleles? What would it result in? Yes, blood type O. What about A and B? What are we saying in this case? A and B are codominant. So what would it result in? Genotype, AB, and what would be the child's blood type? Blood type A and B. So you see, of course, we could have a parent with blood type A and a parent that has blood type B coming together to have a child that has blood type A and B. Now, for our next class, we're going to be looking at some of these inheritance. And that is all that we have for today's class for CSEC Biology. I do honestly hope that, of course, you were able to understand the genetic cross. You were able to understand the important definitions that we were able to get today. One tidbit also to remind you, for phenotype, though phenotype is determined by your genotype, it is also influenced by environmental factors. You ever grow up and you hear your parents say, of course, you help to build up the baby forehead or build up the nose. So even though it's a case where your parents could have a very big forehead, and of course, we could have it a case being where we manipulate it using the environment. That is all for today for CSEC Biology. And we do hope that you were able to grasp some of the points that were discussed today. You can catch a repeat of today's lesson on JNN today at 4 p.m. and in Schools Not Out highlights on Saturday between 1 and 4 p.m. right here on TVJ. It will also be on video on demand on One Spot Media. Until next time, I am Pierce Lawrence. Stay tuned. Pleasant viewing, stay safe. Remember, wash your hands.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching. Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching. Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest